Okay, so hi there everyone, and welcome again to another meeting of Hempology 101. This is, I think, our 8th year of this free non-credit lecture series, and we're really lucky to be here in so many ways, especially being able to do it outside. And we'll be outside every week as long as the weather allows it, and when the weather isn't nice, we'll be in that Cinecenta, the movie theater. And actually in 2 weeks' time I want to be in the movie theater anyway, because the topic is cannabis research, and I have a couple small movies on research that would be really good to play, some clips from some online stuff. Next week with hemp products, we have our friend Sean from Hemp & Company here, and he'll be talking about different hemp products that are available. And I just confirmed with Dr. Hornby that he'll be here for the cannabis research lecture, or cannabis science, like chemistry one, in 3 weeks' time. So we've got a great lineup here of lectures, and today is probably one of the best we've ever had. And I'm very glad to have Dana Larsen here on really such a important day for people that love cannabis. Today, the Union of BC Municipalities passed a resolution supporting the decriminalization of cannabis in British Columbia. And so this man here owes a lot of credit for that, and Dana Larsen has done a tremendous amount in our community for longer than I've been around, actually. In fact, Hempology 101 really owes a lot to Dana, because he had a convention, Hemp 101, at Simon Fraser University, I believe, in 1993. And with Ian Hunter, who founded the Sacred Herb store here in town, and others. Really, if he hasn't led the movement, he's been right behind people like Mark Emery who have. And so Dana's been critical to our development and growth as a movement here in British Columbia and Canada, if not the world, with the magazine and his other work, with the dispensary and the seed bank and otherwise. I could go on, but today's lecture is about pot and politics, and we couldn't have him here at a better time for so many reasons to talk about it. And I'm just thrilled to have you here, Dana, and thanks for coming.
Well, my pleasure, and thanks for that great introduction, and for all your hard work and success over the years, Ted. So I'm Dana Larsen, and I've got a plan to decriminalize marijuana in British Columbia. And that's what I'm here to talk about. It's called the Sensible BC campaign. But before I get into that too much, I just want to let you know about who I am and what I've been doing over the years. Ted explained some of it a little bit, but my short resume: I was editor of Cannabis Culture magazine for 10 years. I worked there closely with Mark Emery, and people ask me about him and how he's doing quite often. He's in Yazoo, Mississippi. He's going to be there for the next 2 years or so until he gets out, comes back home. And he's learned how to play bass guitar, and he's performing in the prison band, and he's a very optimistic fellow who is doing quite well. And if you're interested in getting in touch with him, write him a letter, and more than likely he'll write back to you and let you know how he's doing down there. After Cannabis Culture magazine, I helped found the Vancouver Seed Bank. It's on East Hastings Street, and then I sold my half of that, and I used that money to open the Vancouver Medicinal Cannabis Dispensary. And now we've got 2 locations, and since we've opened up, we've, I think, helped and mentored many other clubs, and there's now about 13 or so clubs in Vancouver, which is fabulous to see this medical access growing, and we're serving thousands and thousands of people who never before have had access to this kind of quality of medicine. I've also helped found the BC Marijuana Party and the Canadian Marijuana Party, but 9 years ago I joined the NDP, and I've had a lot of adventures in the NDP. That's really a whole other lecture series at that point, but I ran for the leadership of the BC NDP last year, and I was able to articulate a lot of the value of legalizing marijuana, ending the war on drugs, and addressing these issues, and it worked really well. I got a lot of support within the party and was able to solidify a lot of the support for reforming marijuana laws in the NDP. But this plan that I've got now, called Sensible BC, I've never felt more optimistic or more positive in all the 20+ years that I've been working to legalize marijuana than I do today, right now, right here. And I think that's really important for us. Over the time that I worked all these years in this effort, we've mostly been trying to stop bad things from happening. It's mostly been the government wants to pass a bad law, and we're trying to make it less bad, or trying to stop or delay it. Sometimes we succeed, Usually we don't. You know, the laws have really only gotten worse over the years. We've had a lot of success in other areas, not so much with the laws directly, but in terms of ignoring the laws and getting around the laws and just encouraging them not to enforce the laws. You wouldn't know it, but bongs and pipes are still illegal in Canada. Under the criminal code, marijuana magazines. Ted Smith's wonderful book is actually censored literature in Canada. Access to medical marijuana is not allowed either. It's prohibited, and yet you can get all these things quite readily across the country, and that is due to people working to make these laws get ignored, to violating the laws and showing how ridiculous they are. And you know, Mark Emery was a big part of that back in the day, making marijuana grow books and marijuana bongs and pipes, and then marijuana seeds available. And although he's paying for the price of that in a U.S. prison, the fact is marijuana seeds are readily available to any Canadian at any time. Medical marijuana is available, and if you don't live in a town that has medical marijuana, you can probably mail order it from Vancouver, from our dispensary or some other ones, and information is widely available. So we've won a lot of these battles, but we never have made the laws better. The laws have always gotten worse, even if they also get ignored a lot of the time these days. And so I wanted to write our own law. I thought we should be writing our own laws and getting these things passed rather than relying on politicians who don't understand marijuana. A lot of them don't particularly care about marijuana. They're not going to write the kind of laws that we need. We know the kind of laws that we need. Let's write our own law and get it passed. And so I worked with Kirk Tusaw, who's a brilliant lawyer who's done a lot of good work over here and who's been responsible for many challenges to the law that have won us great victories. It's because of Kirk Tusaw's legal work and the bravery of Ted and others here that baked goods and cannabis extracts have been accepted by Health Canada only through the force of the courts as being legitimate medicine that patients have the right to access to. And Kirk's won a lot of other battles for medical cannabis and for our movement in general. So he and I got together and we wrote a law called the Sensible Policing Act. And we worked quite hard. It took us many months and a lot of back and forth to figure this out, but we figured out a way to decriminalize marijuana as a province in British Columbia. And all of the provinces in Canada, we have jurisdiction over policing and over the administration of justice. We pay for the police in British Columbia. We choose, perhaps at our peril, to hire the RCMP, but they are provincial police officers when they're hired by us. They're under contract, and they're supposed to take their direction and their priorities, and everything they're supposed to be doing comes from the province and the Attorney General. And they get their authority under a legislation called the Police Act. So we wrote the Sensible Policing Act, and this legislation is an amendment to the Police Act, and it simply says the police must make marijuana, possession of marijuana, their absolute lowest priority. They must spend no money, no time, no resources on searching or seizing or detaining or taking people's marijuana away from them or questioning them over marijuana or arresting them if it's simple possession. And this law it would be a wonderful change in our province. And we've seen the opposite happening. Over the last 5 or 6 years, possession charges have been going up every single year in our province. Not coincidentally, since Stephen Harper became Prime Minister, marijuana possession charges have gone up. They were double. In 2010, they had doubled from what they were in 2005. People often feel that, oh, no one gets busted for marijuana in British Columbia for smoking a joint. Well, maybe not when you're here, maybe not when you're in downtown Vancouver, but in our province, we lead all the provinces in Canada when it comes to per capita marijuana arrests. We're far above the national average. It's around 420 people per 100,000 people have an interaction over marijuana in British Columbia, and 3,500 people get charged. That's 10 people every day who get charged criminally for possession of marijuana, simple possession of marijuana. And there's, as I said, there's about 19,000 people that get their pot taken away or have the joint put out or have to stub it out in the ground in front of a police officer, who get handcuffed and detained and taken down to the police station and strip searched, but don't end up getting charged at the end of that. 19,000 people a year. 3,500 actually get charged for simple possession in British Columbia every single year. That's 10 a day. In my opinion, that's 10 too many. And so the Sensible Policing Act would put a stop to that. It would eliminate virtually all possession charges in British Columbia. It would save us a lot of money. And you know, if the police have the discretion to double the charges in 10 years or 5 years, they have the discretion to half those charges or third them or drop them down to nothing. This is what the police can do. The Sensible Policing Act has a second part to it as well, and that part is to help us go further. It calls upon the federal government to change the marijuana laws, or even just to give British Columbia an exemption so we can try our own thing here for a while. And it sets up a provincial commission to tour around the province and talk to people and find out what kind of rules and regulations and laws we will need in place when marijuana is fully legalized. Because it falls under provincial jurisdiction, like alcohol, like tobacco, marijuana, if it's legal, once the federal government takes its hands off it, it mostly becomes provincial jurisdiction, and questions of age limits or points of sale or tax rates or how many plants you can grow in your home if there is a limit, or any of those kind of questions, they all fall under provincial jurisdiction. And I'm not sure I know the answers to those things. I know what we're doing now is wrong. I believe people have the right to grow their own medicine in their own home, as long as they're doing it safely. And I think you have the right to buy marijuana in a shop, and it should be some kind of rules to make sure it's safe. And if they say it's organic, it should be organic, and it should be at a reasonable price. But I'm happy to pay some taxes if I'm buying marijuana in a shop. And if I'm buying a joint after dinner in a nice cafe, I don't mind paying a little more for that either, like you might for a bottle of wine, depending on where you get it and how you access it. But if you want to grow marijuana in your own home, that should also definitely be allowed. But there should be some rules so you're not wrecking your house and you're not doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And I think we can all kind of agree on that. But the specifics of that, let's work that out. Let's figure out what those rules should be and put them in place, because these laws are going to change. But the problem with the Sensible Policing Act is that we got to put this thing into law. But luckily, we live in a province where we can do that all by ourselves. We don't have to rely on our politicians to pass these laws. I would love it if we could just convince people in Victoria, the capital, if we could convince our politicians just to pass this law, it would save us a lot of effort. But we can have a referendum. We're the only province in Canada where citizens can get together, get enough signatures, and change the law and force their politicians to pass the law that we wrote. It's very, very difficult. Since this legislation was put into place to have referendums, we've only ever had one group ever succeed in getting something on the ballot. Of course, that was the anti-HST campaign. And we had the government of the day, the Liberals, campaigning against it, doing everything they could to stop it, being totally opposed to it, and yet it passed monumentally, and it was a huge victory for those who wanted to get rid of the HST. Well, you know, marijuana polls way higher than the anti-HST campaign did. We got about 75–80% of Canadians who don't, and people in British Columbia, who don't think you should be bothered if you're just smoking a joint and you're not bothering anybody. And about 3/4 of people in this province recognize that the whole war on marijuana is a failure and that we should be doing something entirely different. Those are huge numbers, more than any political party has ever received as a percentage of the vote ever in our province's history. And so we can take advantage of those numbers. We can make this happen. But to make a referendum happen in this province, it's a massive task. You have to get 10% of the signatures of registered voters in each of the province's 85 ridings. It's a different number for each riding, but you're looking at around 4,000 or 5,000 people in each of the ridings. There's 85 ridings. We need about 400,000 plus signatures to make this work. Not only that, but we only would have 3 months to get those signatures in. You only have 90 days to collect those signatures. It's very difficult, but we can do it, and we've worked out a very unique strategy to figure this out, because the system has fixed dates, so that if we had all the signatures now or next year or whenever, the next referendum would be held in September 2014. Anybody that gets the signatures before early 2014 would qualify for that. So what we've done is we wrote our legislation, we gave it to Elections BC, we said we're going to start collecting signatures now. They had talked to their lawyers, they went through it, they said yes, this legislation is something you can do, we consider it within the jurisdiction of the province, go ahead, start getting your signatures. And that got us a lot of media attention. If you've been watching, we got a lot of stuff over the last week or so about our Sensible BC campaign. It was a really big media hit. But we're not really going to start collecting those signatures right now because we just don't have the infrastructure in place. We don't have the thousands of volunteers that we're going to need, although I think I see a dozen volunteers here right now who are going to help out. But so what we're going to do is we're going to collect signatures over the next year. We're going to register people. I want you to go out, register your friends, register your family, sign up at our website. We got forms you can sign. You can bring those forms to other people and get them to sign it. Let's work so that by the time next September rolls around, when we resubmit our legislation to Elections BC and when we start the clock again officially for those 90 days, we have already got all the folks we need signed up around the province. All we have to do is send our volunteers to contact those people that said they were going to sign and get them to sign the official form. That's the only way we can do this, but I believe this is the key to victory. And if we organize and keep the pressure up over the coming year, I'll be traveling around all across this province, talking to people, trying to get people to share this vision of how we can change these laws. And I find people are really excited. People like this idea that we can actually get together and do something. It's been a very frustrating time seeing Stephen Harper in power. When you want to change the marijuana laws and you recognize how important this issue is, the conversation always ends with, yeah, I agree with you, but until we change the government in Ottawa, you're never going to get anything happen, so why even talk about it? Well, you know, it doesn't matter. Stephen Harper doesn't always get what he wants. And we can change the laws in British Columbia. We can make it happen. We beat the Harper Conservatives when it came to the supervised injection site. They went to the wall to shut that place down, and they lost. It's still open. We can win this fight too. Provinces have a lot of power, and he will not be able to stand against the force of a successful provincial referendum. Winning the vote in 2014 is the easy part. If we had a vote today, we'd win with a 75% majority. Of that, I'm very confident. The hard part is getting the signatures. It's a huge effort. So if you're watching this at home, go to sensiblebc.ca. You can register at the website quite easily. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to share your information with anybody else. We'll only email you if you want to hear from us. But at the least, if you sign up there, then next September we can get your signature really easily. But of course, I want you to do more. And if you're watching this or if you're here, it's because you love marijuana and because cannabis has more than likely helped you in your life, has brought you joy and happiness, has made you a better person. Cannabis use has benefited me immensely, medicinally, spiritually, socially. I love marijuana. It's helped me a lot in my life. It's made me a better person. It's given me a lot more enjoyment and pleasure in many ways, and I want to give back to that plant. Love marijuana the way I do should not be going to prison for their passion about this plant and for the fact that it helps them and heals them. So if marijuana has helped you, if cannabis has made you a better person or helped you, then I want you to give back to the cannabis plant. And we got a year. We're not talking, I mean, I'd love it if you want to go full-time working for us and spend 40 hours a week, but just spend half an hour a day or an hour or two a week. Put aside a bit of time on your weekend to call your friends, to bug people, to email people, to put our banner ads up on your website. We got a nice script for you and explanations how to go door to door and talk to your neighbors. The odd person might tell you to get lost. They don't want to hear from you, but I bet you'll get a lot of smiles, a lot of thanks, a lot of interest. If someone knocked on my door saying, hey, you want to legalize marijuana? You want to decriminalize marijuana? Can you sign here, please? I would be thrilled to sign there. So I want you to don't be shy to get out there, because we've got huge support, but we need to organize. We will not succeed in passing this law if we're not organized and disciplined and if we're not working hard. But so we have a year to do this so we can make it happen. And I don't know if I have much else to say other than that right now. I think the Sensible Policing Act and the Sensible BC campaign is the most important thing we can be doing. Oh, I wanted to talk about the Union of BC Municipalities. That happened today. Okay, good. No, I was going to take some questions and stuff, but I was going to add that today we were talking about this. The Union of BC Municipalities, it's all the cities and towns all across the province, have their annual meeting over this week. And they discuss policy and resolutions and what their priorities are and what their most important issues are. Well, number 5 on the list of their most important issues that they debated was whether or not they would support the decriminalization of marijuana and studying how to go further and how to legally regulate and deal with cannabis in a legal, open way. And they had a big debate on Monday morning. They had 3 speakers on the against side, a criminologist and 2 police officers, the head of the RCMP drug squad in BC and an American police officer who came up. On the pro-reform side, they had Dr. Evan Wood, who's a brilliant doctor and founder of the Stop the Violence campaign, which has gotten a lot of media over the last year, getting mainstream political figures, many retired, but some still on board to endorse changing the law. We also had David Bratzer, who's a Victoria police officer who does a lot of work to support reforming of the cannabis laws, and he got, I think, one of the biggest applauses of the night when he talked about the career sacrifices that he had made as an officer by bringing these issues forward and how it affected his work and how he was looked at. But he's a very brave guy and really brings a good perspective to the debate as a police officer who works on the street. He used to be a prison guard before that, and he really understands the need for reform. And also on the pro side was the former Attorney General of British Columbia, Jeff Plant, who was a Liberal Attorney General. Unfortunately, while he was in power, didn't do much to help the situation, but now that he's out of power, he's willing to talk about this. Very eloquent speaker on the issue, had a lot to say, has a lot of gravitas, and the room was standing room only. It was packed full of mayors and city councilors from all across the province. There was clearly a lot of interest in this and a lot of really good questions at the end as well. And I think they, when I saw how that debate went, I knew that this thing was going to pass because they were clearly not swayed by the arguments from the other side. And you know, Daryl Plekas especially, he's the criminologist, and he really bothered me when he spoke because he's someone who's got a PhD. He's someone who understands how studies work and what their limitations are and how science is supposed to go. But he really misrepresented a lot of the data and really lied a lot when he was talking. And you know, you might have heard about that study that came out a few months ago claiming that cannabis use can harm the IQ. And what that study, if you look at it, what it really said was that for pretty much everybody that they looked at, marijuana had no effect on people's IQ at all. They only found a slight decrease in heavy early teenage users. And it's only one study. And if you read the people who did it, they were like, well, there's plenty of, you know, we need more research and this doesn't really prove anything, but it's only a first step. But a study that shows that everybody except for heavy early teenage users, there's no problems. Dr. Daryl Plekas says, it shows marijuana is stupid and it makes you stupider. Well, that's not what it showed at all. It shows that for virtually everybody, marijuana has no effect on IQ and is harmless in that sense, and that maybe people who are 14 shouldn't smoke 5 joints a day. You know, that's what that study showed. So I find that kind of intellectual dishonesty, it really bothers me, you know, because we don't do that on our side. You know, we're pretty open about how marijuana works and what it does, and so I don't like that. That really bothered me. And he's being paid to be there by the RCMP, which he also didn't mention during his speech as well. And that bothers me too, that our tax dollars are going towards, you know, the police always say, we just enforce the laws. We don't make the laws. We don't have anything. We just do what we're told. But then when it comes to the debate, they're front and center saying, we need stronger, more tools and more laws, and don't decriminalize, don't change the law. You can't have it both ways. And I really think there's a hypocrisy there that really bothers me. But at this convention, it was the most debated thing. There was passionate arguments on both sides, and it passed with 70% support. That's about the same. It got about 3/4 support when it was on Vancouver Island. Municipalities looked at it. So now the official policy of all the cities and towns in British Columbia is to support the decriminalization of marijuana and to work, to study, to figure out how we're going to go further and how we can legally regulate marijuana in the future. And this will now go, I believe, to the Canadian Municipality Convention. I'm not sure when that is, but in the next year or so, this same resolution will be debated by all the cities and towns across Canada, and hopefully they'll support that too. But people often say that this is a federal law and we can't do anything as a city, we can't do anything as a province, and this is really what shows the lie to that, is that the best place to get something done is at the city level, at the municipal level, and at the provincial level. We can have a lot more influence on our cities. And everywhere around the world, it's always like that. It's the cities that make the changes first, then it's the states and provinces, and then finally it's the federal governments, maybe at the end. And we've seen that with a lot of drug policy stuff in the U.S., for needle exchange. The city of San Francisco every year declares a medical emergency. It's the only way they can legally operate a needle exchange in their city because it violates federal law. But they found a loophole the way through it to make this happen so they can save some lives. And it was cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles that first had medical cannabis dispensaries and we're giving them shelter, just like here in Victoria and Vancouver and Toronto are some of the cities that are giving marijuana dispensaries shelter and letting them operate, where other cities do not. And certainly federal law would want to see us all shut down, but the VPD and the Victoria Police, they may not be perfect, but for the most part these days, they're letting medical marijuana dispensaries open and operate, and they're not prioritizing them because they know it's a waste of their time. They know that the citizens in their communities don't consider medical marijuana a crime or a priority. Their city council is saying, we'd rather you spent your money doing other stuff than busting the medical marijuana dispensary and getting everybody all worked up over something. And so it's the cities that are really starting to end this and starting to stand up against this. And for insight, it was the city of Vancouver, then the province of British Columbia, standing up against the federal government to make those changes happen. So it's not going to come from the top down. It's not going to be from Ottawa and then BC and then the cities. It's going to be through cities and then through the province of British Columbia, through the Sensible Policing Act. And if we pass this legislation here, it will spread to other provinces across Canada. It only takes one opening here. Other places will see the success we're having, we'll see how well it works, and there will be cries for these kind of laws to spread across to Canada. I'm very confident of that. People also sometimes say, oh, well, it's not about Ottawa, it's about Washington, D.C., and it's about the UN. Everyone passes the buck up to the other guy, to the next level of government. And yet the fear of what's going to happen with the U.S. is really very overblown. Many American states have decriminalized marijuana, not quite the same way as our true decriminalization. Some of them have small fines in Oregon and I think Denver, Colorado, before they brought in medical marijuana. It's a small fine for possession of cannabis. And many other states have done that as well. And medical marijuana in California, they passed their wonderful resolution. Medical marijuana is widely available. Many other states have passed these resolutions. It's always the people passing it, often against all the authority figures are against it and saying we don't want to pass it. And even after it passes, sometimes they still struggle and don't want to do it. But it's always the people rising up to make this happen. And this November in Washington, in Oregon, and in Colorado, they are voting to legalize marijuana at the state level. And the one in Washington has got over 60% support among decided voters. It's probably going to pass. The one in Colorado is also doing really well too. One in Oregon may not make it, we'll see, but 2 out of 3, I'll take that. And the Washington initiative will allow everybody in their state to possess an ounce of marijuana and to buy up to an ounce of marijuana from some kind of a government-run marijuana store. They haven't worked out the details, but that is fabulous. And whether or not you got your ounce of marijuana from the government-run store, you can possess any ounce of marijuana that's out there. Once you've got your ounce in your hands, that is legal. It'll be a huge step forward for us, and it puts the lie to the idea that somehow, you know, they're going to invade us or shut down the border. We are trailing the U.S. when it comes to this issue. We are behind them. Our medical marijuana program is not that great, although it's better than a lot of other countries. But compared to California and the access they have there, we are way behind in Canada. We got some catching up to do with our American neighbors. And you know what? In Mexico, they're facing incredible violence and conflicts down there over their drugs. They've actually decriminalized possession of many things as well. Small amounts of cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, marijuana, those are all decriminalized in Mexico. You don't hear that a lot, but no one in America complained about that. They see the terrible conflicts and challenges they're facing. It's only a first small step to decriminalize possession. It's not the final end of anything, but it takes the users off the front lines of the war on drugs, because most of the enforcement, most of what we call the war on drugs is a war on marijuana, and most of the war on marijuana is a war on pot smokers. I've been looking through the statistics a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. Well, what kind of enforcement? This is where I discovered that the charges for possession have doubled since 2005 to 2010. Something else I discovered is that they always talk about how it's the export market and it's the exporting and the marijuana going across the border. Well, you know, they bust 3,500 people for possession of marijuana. Each year they bust 3 to 12 people for exporting. It's a tiny, tiny number. It's small. It's like it's 1, 6, 12, 8. Like every year, it's never more than 12 or so people that get charged for exporting marijuana. So they're clearly, this is not where their enforcement dollars are going. Their enforcement dollars, their time, their effort, it goes to the easy pickings. And the easy pickings is the person smoking a joint on the corner, especially if that person is young, got long hair, got dreadlocks, if they're First Nations, if the cop's having a bad day, if the cop doesn't like your attitude or the clothes you're wearing, it gives them an excuse. And that's where these charges come from. They're not really charges for possession of marijuana, they're charges for disrespect of the police officer, they're charges for looking the wrong way or being the wrong color or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's incredibly discriminatory how this is dealt with. And of those 19,000 people where they take the pot away and then they only charge 3,500 of them, there's a huge amount of discretion there for police officers, and that really is inappropriate, I think. It shouldn't be up to the cop to be the judge and the jury, because for most people who get charged with possession, it's the process that's the punishment. It's the humiliation. It's the going to get to be processed, to be handcuffed in front of your friends and family, being sitting in the back of the police car with the cuffs biting into your wrists. It's being strip searched. It's being humiliated. Those are the things. Often at the end of it, you don't get a punishment, or you get your day in jail and that's it, or they let you go, put you on diversion. But it's the process and the humiliation that is ultimately the punishment, and that is not reflected adequately in the statistics. So the Sensible Policing Act is how we're going to change these laws. I want you to go to sensiblebc.ca. I want you to sign up. I want you to look at, Kayla here has got some forms you can fill out if you want to register with our group. But I want you to get out. I want you to get involved. I want you to do something, because we all love marijuana. We all believe in marijuana. Marijuana has helped us all be better people and live better lives. Let's get back to that plant. Let's remember our friends that are in prison, not just in BC, but all around the world. People who can't be free, like Mark Emery and like the countless others whose names we don't know and we'll never know. but who are suffering in prison because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, because they loved marijuana, because they were trying to grow marijuana, because they wanted to make it available to their friends and people who need it, and because of that they were punished often very, very severely. And what we do here in Victoria and in British Columbia and in Canada will be heard around the world. When we change these laws here, it will give hope and inspiration, and it will to people all around the planet, and it will help them, make it easier for them to change their laws in their communities. So don't ever despair or think that you don't have the power, because we all have an immense power, and together we can do anything. And I have great faith in my heart, after the last 20 years of seeing this, of working with Mark Emery, of struggling to be able to sell bongs and pipes and seeds, of seeing people getting busted, of seeing all these things happen, I believe today, right now, more than ever, that we are closer today to changing these laws in British Columbia, to breaking the back of the drug war all across Canada. Sensible BC campaign is the path to that, but we need your help. We need all of your help to make that happen. And that's all I got to say, but I'll be happy to answer any questions and chat with you for a while more.
5 minutes on federal NDP and prohibition stuff. You've got lots of time.
Federal NDP and prohibition stuff. Well, I'll say this. I'll say that the NDP and the Liberals used to both be afraid, and when the NDP came out and strongly on marijuana, the Liberals would make fun of us, and they would mock us for marijuana stuff. And when I ran for the NDP in 2008, it was the Liberal Party that put together a compilation of my greatest hits from Pot TV to make me look like a crazy stoner person, which maybe I am, you can decide for yourselves. But it was the Liberals that attacked the NDP for being too soft on marijuana. Now it's gone the other way. Since now that they're out of power and can't really do anything about the marijuana laws, the Liberals have adopted a very excellent policy on marijuana. They support legalization of marijuana. The young Liberals especially are really campaigning hard on this issue. They're out there giving people buttons, legalize it, Liberal Party, and putting up posters. I think it's great. I think it's great. I've been working in the NDP for 9 years now, and I'm very confident the NDP has got a very progressive policy on cannabis. We've worked hard to change the laws, to stop Harper, to stop the Liberals when they were in power from making the marijuana laws worse, which they did, and we've worked to try to stop the Conservatives from changing the marijuana laws too. This fills me with hope that instead of our parties being nervous about it, no, don't call us Cheech and Chong, instead they're competing to be who's more progressive. I love that the Liberals are attacking my party for not being cool enough on marijuana, even though I think it's kind of a stupid attack and not really fair, whatever. I think it's okay because it'll make it easier for Prime Minister Thomas Mulcair when he wins the next election in 2015. It'll make it way easier for the NDP, or maybe the NDP Liberal coalition or whatever. But having the Liberals there, having the Green Party, having the NDP on this, it means we're all united on this against the Stephen Harper policy of mandatory minimums, of crackdowns, of more penalties, of more jail time, of trying to wipe out marijuana. So whatever the results of the next election in 2015, which will happen about 6 months after we pass our referendum, when we get this referendum passed, it will become one of the top issues of the next federal election campaign. I assure you of that. And so when we defeat Stephen Harper, whoever's in power, whether the Liberals make some amazing comeback and it's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whether Mulcair gets in, whether it's some combination of the two, Prime Minister Elizabeth May, who knows? As long as it's not Harper, we're going to have a receptive government that is going to be willing to make some changes to the marijuana laws. And that is something we've never had in this country before. We've never had that before. The NDP was always there, but a little nervous about looking too stony, and the Liberals would try to play both sides, but when they were in power, they only made the marijuana laws stricter and worse. But I have faith for the first time that we've got a good political consensus on all the non-Harper teams that the marijuana laws need changing. And I'll add that a lot of Conservatives want to change the marijuana laws too. A lot of folks who voted for Stephen Harper want to change the marijuana laws, believe it or not. Polls show that 80% of British Columbians don't think that someone who smokes a joint should go to jail. But Harper got a lot more than 20% of the vote in BC. But for a lot of people, they agree with us, but it's not the issue they're voting on. They're voting on the economy or on whatever other issue that is important to them. But when we win this referendum, as we continue, the marijuana issue becomes more and more important. More and more people are voting over this issue and recognizing the importance of this issue. At our dispensary, people come in every day who are senior citizens who have never used marijuana before in their lives. And they say, oh, my grandson told me it'll help me with my arthritis, or it'll help me with my other ailments. And they become converts, and they learn about marijuana and about the healing benefits of cannabis, and they get on board. We are converting people every day. And the longer this battle goes on, the more cannabis becomes an issue people are voting on, the more it becomes something that is a defining issue. And even the Harper conservatives don't like to say they're going after pot smokers. Even they, although that's what they're doing, they always say, oh, it's 6 plants. It's a lot of plants. Someone growing 6 plants, that's organized crime. You can get 12 million joints out of 6 plants, and that could get Vancouver, whatever. They always try to inflate it, but they'll never say, oh, we're targeting marijuana smokers, and we think pot smokers should go to jail. So it'll be very hard for our opponents to go against the Sensible Policing Act, because no one's trying to call for the incarceration of the average toker. So I think we'll have a lot of success with that, and it'll make it difficult for the Harperites and for the conservatives and for those who oppose us to go against it. But we got to make an alliance. It's not about the NDP. It's not just about the socialists or the left or the right. This is an issue that crosses left and right. I consider myself a lefty, but certainly there's a lot of libertarians out there that are dear friends and that we work together on this stuff. There's people all across the spectrum, Green Party, there's conservatives, there's Scott Reed is a conservative member of parliament. He's the only one, but they got one MP in there who says that marijuana prohibition has failed, and he's a conservative member of parliament. So they're there. I wish he was their prime minister. That might, that'd be a lot different kind of conservative than what we got now. But we got to reach across the spectrum. It's got to be all kinds of people with all kinds of beliefs, people who don't like marijuana, who think marijuana is harmful. And they recognize that the way to reduce those harms is in a legal, regulated environment. We need those people on board with us. They may not like that we smoke pot. That's okay. You don't have to like that we do it. You don't have to have the love of cannabis that we all do. As long as you recognize that these laws are failed, you don't want your tax dollars going to harassing pot smokers. You want them to do it in their homes or where you can't smell it. Hey, you join our team, right? We're all on the same team. It's about that. And I really believe this is coming to a head, and we're going to change these issues. And we've had such success with the Liberals, with the NDP, with the Green Party, of course, provincially and federally. And I've got a lot of friends in that provincial caucus who are really excited about this legislation, who want to see these laws come pass. Agree with that, and having this UBCM pass, having all the mayors and councillors across this province say they want to decriminalize marijuana, having 4 former attorney generals, having the other mayors come up beforehand, having this broad consensus, it makes it easier now for people at the higher levels, for Adrian Dix and for Thomas Mulcair, for whoever the new Liberal leader is, to go, yeah, I agree with those guys. What those mayors said, that makes sense. I'll go along with that. So we've come a long way, we've made a lot of progress, and the Sensible BC is the path forward. And I don't have to stop talking, I can take questions or anything like that, but or if Ted has any more topics he wants me to go on to, I can do that as well. But do you have any questions or anything, anybody wants to make a point or ask me anything, or? Yes, sir? The fellow in the back with the Free Mark shirt.
Decriminalization, is that going to be, would there be fines put into that for...
I'm glad you asked me that question, because we've had people who are saying, decriminalization, we don't want fines, we don't want all that, there's net widening, and I agree, I don't want to see, and the words decriminalization and legalization, they mean different things to different people, there's all kinds of ways that they can be interpreted, right? So when the Liberal Party would say decriminalization when they were in power, and when the police say decrim, they mean $1,000 fine, and if you don't pay your fine, then you go to jail, and the third time you get caught, you go to jail, and we're going to crack down on growers and traffickers at the same time. To some people, that's decriminalization. I don't support that model. The decriminalization we've got, it's really a de facto decriminalization, because we're not changing the federal law. We're just telling police, don't bug pot smokers. You are forbidden from spending any time or any money on searching, seizing, detaining, arresting, anything to do with cannabis. If it's simple possession, leave them alone. And if you do mess with somebody for simple possession, you must write a lengthy report as to why you chose to do that. There may be disciplinary action as well, but you have to write a lengthy report explaining why, all the circumstances, and that report, with the identifying of the person who was being charged taken out of it, goes on the government website. So it's a huge, first of all, it's against the rules entirely, and they can be punished if they go against it, but also police officers hate paperwork. Nothing worse than having to go and write a long report. This is why I took Johnny's marijuana away. I saw Johnny on the corner smoking a joint. Like, they do not want to do that. So it's got a number of ways, but there's no fines, no ticketing, nothing like that. I will say, to deal with youth, people under the age of majority, to deal with that question, because we couldn't put in an age limit, and we don't want young people to get charged with marijuana either, whether you're 16 or whatever. Like, we don't want you to get charged. But we felt there should be some way to find a compromise there. So we decided, what we did is, if you're under the age of majority, cannabis is treated the same as alcohol. If you're in, and it can't be, the penalty cannot be any stricter than alcohol. So if you don't have a medical card or some kind of legal exemption, a youth who's caught with marijuana, police officer can seize it just like it was alcohol, and they can write you a ticket, which cannot be any greater than the ticket would be if you had alcohol with you. There's not a criminal record if you get caught the 5th time or the 6th time. There's no like extra penalty. It's exactly the same or less than the penalties for alcohol. And I feel that, I hope that's a good solution. We debated about that a lot, but I didn't want to say if you're under 18 you're going to get a criminal record and be punished. That's not the solution. But I don't think the average voter would, our opponents would say, so a 12-year-old kid could smoke a joint in front of a police officer and the cop couldn't do anything? Well, I didn't think that was appropriate either. So we tried to find this middle ground. But I hope most people recognize or will feel that treating alcohol and marijuana for people under the age of 18, making it the same, is a reasonable compromise to deal with the questions of youth and alcohol. In your own home or with your parents or whatever, and you know, in an environment where you're allowed to or police officers aren't there, like alcohol, you know, that would be fine, right? So it's only if a police officer sees a young person doing it. Yes?
Maybe I just arrived late, but who exactly is proposing this particular model of decriminalization?
Me, on our group. It's a Sensible BC. We've launched a campaign called Sensible BC. We've written this legislation called the Sensible Policing Act. You can we don't have a copy here, but you can read the legislation online. We got like a summary, and it decriminalizes cannabis possession de facto by instructing the police of the province who fall under provincial jurisdiction to stop bothering pot smokers, essentially, to take no action, no searching, no seizing when it comes to simple possession of cannabis. This is not the final solution to the marijuana problem by any means, but it takes marijuana users off the front lines of the war on drugs. I like that line. I think it's really appropriate. It takes pot smokers off the front lines of the war on drugs, and it recognizes that the vast majority of police resources when it comes to the so-called drug war, it's against pot smokers. That's where they're spending all their money, all their time, all their effort is busting pot smokers. And that's the one thing that everybody can agree they shouldn't be doing. Everybody pretty much agrees with that. 80% of British Columbians agree that the police should have better things to do with their time than busting pot smokers. With the Sensible Policing Act, it also goes further because it mandates the province to set up the study to figure out how we're going to go further. It makes the province officially call upon the federal government to change the laws. And you know, when we had alcohol prohibition, it wasn't the whole country at a time. Different provinces passed their own prohibitions on alcohol at different times. Quebec was the last one in and the first one out. It was often done with referendums across the country, and so it's entirely appropriate for British Columbia to take control of cannabis as a province, to ask the federal government to let us treat cannabis in a similar way to alcohol and tobacco. Not the exact same way, but to find a model that works that's similar to that, with age limits, quality controls, labeling. If you want to grow your own tobacco, you can. You can grow 30 kilos of tobacco per adult in your household every year legally. There's a limit, but it's a pretty big one. If you want to, you know, grow more than 30 kilos of tobacco, you got to get a license. I would be happy to have that for cannabis. If you want to grow more than 30 kilos of cannabis, you got to get a license, right? I mean, maybe the limit should be smaller. I don't know, but we can just debate those things, right? But there should be, if you want to brew your own wine or beer at home, you can do that. You want to go to a U-Brew, you can do that. You want to buy some liquor at the beer at the liquor store, you can do that. You want to pay more for it in a pub, you can pay a lot more for it in a fancy restaurant. We should have all those options for cannabis. Those who want to grow their own should be able to do so. If you want to buy it in bulk, if you want to buy it, you know, a little joint after dinner in a fancy restaurant, all those options should be available, I think, and have different tax rates and different rules and things around them. But I think the big, like, once we pass this, the debate will be about what those rules should be and what exactly they should be. What should the age limit be? 18? Maybe it should be 16. The Senate, our Canada Senate, recommended a 16-year age limit to be able to buy marijuana in the stores. They said it's less harmful than alcohol, less harmful than tobacco. Why shouldn't the limit be 16? And I don't have any problem with that, although I wouldn't be opposed if it was 18 either, right? But we got to figure that stuff out, and I think that's a conversation, not if we should change the marijuana laws, but what are we going to change them to, and what exactly are we going to do that so then we can do it. We can't, legally regulate cannabis until we have a consensus on what the new laws should be. But decriminalizing possession, taking pot smokers out of the equation, we can all agree that's a great first step. It's symbolically important, it's practically important, it'll save thousands of people every year in British Columbia, it'll save us a lot of money. We're trying to figure out exactly how much money. We're doing a study right now. We've hired Professor Neil Boyd, who's a criminology professor at Simon Fraser University, who's written extensively on drug and marijuana policy issues, and he's doing a study talking to people who have been busted for marijuana possession, talking to the police, talking to the prosecutors, trying to figure out how they decide, of these 19,000 people that they talk to every year about marijuana, how do they pick that unlucky 3,500 who are going to get charged? What do they do with those people? How many of them go to jail? What happens to them? What's this costing us as a province? And we're going to have some numbers to work with. But I guarantee you, whatever the number is, it's too much. Whatever it is, it's too much, because we shouldn't be spending any money on this at all. And if it's a $5 million or $50 million or whatever the number is that we're spending every year as a province, I'm sure we can all think of a lot of better ways to spend that money, especially when our courts are overcrowded. This is a big problem. When our provincial government's saying, we got to cut back services, we got to do something, we're out of money, we're going bankrupt. Well, ending the war on cannabis users, on pot smokers, will save a lot of money. Taxing and regulating and controlling cannabis will bring in a large amount. Yes.
What would you say to, I know that when I'm discussing this point, the decriminalization of other drugs comes up as well, other illicit drugs, MDMA, cocaine, things like that. So what do you see as the future for those things? And does that particularly interest you?
Oh, I've done a lot of work in regards to the whole war on drugs, and I really see it as all interconnected issues, absolutely. The group that I founded in the NDP is called End Prohibition, and we work ending prohibition on all substances. That being said, I don't advocate ending prohibition. Doesn't mean, like, the opposite of prohibition isn't a free-for-all. It's regulation, it's control. I don't advocate that you should be able to go and buy a syringe of pure cocaine at any age at the corner store. That's not what legalization would look like. But I believe your doctor should be able to prescribe you cocaine if you need it. I believe you should be able to purchase a products with coca in them of a certain potency and dosage. Not sure what that dosage should be, but like put the coca back in Coca-Cola, sell it to adults. I'd be happy with something like that. But the Sensible BC campaign is not about that. I worry about talking about other drugs because I don't want to scare people who support changing the cannabis laws but are afraid of other substances. But I would remind people that for the most part, what we call illegal drugs are really plants. And they're plants that for the most part have been used by human beings culturally, socially, religiously, spiritually, medicinally since before recorded history. The coca leaf is a wonderful leaf. It's highly beneficial in its whole form. It's very nutritious and beneficial. It's higher than meat and protein. Coca leaf is higher than calcium, than milk and calcium. It's full of micronutrients. Small amount of coca leaf gives you a lot of food value. Very small amount of coca alkaloids, of which cocaine is one. But coca leaf in its whole form is essentially harmless, if not beneficial. Extracted pure cocaine, injecting that or using it in that form is much more risky. And the more pure something gets, the riskier it gets. Prohibition always makes these things stronger. No one's bringing in coca leaf, except maybe for me once in a while, but no one's bringing in coca leaf because under the law, coca leaf and cocaine are exactly the same. The law prohibits the coca plant and everything you make out of it. But clearly someone chewing coca leaf, any regular person can recognize that someone chewing some coca leaf is not doing themselves harm, or if they are, it's certainly a lot less harm than injecting pure cocaine or street cocaine, which is actually going to be adulterated with all kinds of other stuff. It may not be cocaine at all, right? So prohibition makes things more dangerous. But I would advocate for a regulated, controlled market. I would medicalize a lot of that. I would give doctors the control to prescribe things to those who are addicted or those who need it. And I would try to find some kind of regulated model. But I think that banning plants is always a bad idea. but I do think that we need regulation and control about making really strong extracts and selling those. And for marijuana too, by the way. I mean, marijuana can be quite powerful and psychedelic. If you eat a large quantity of marijuana, it can be a really powerful psychedelic experience. Having a few puffs off a joint, the way the average person uses marijuana, is a very small dose and is relatively mild effects. But it's really the dosage and the potency that where harm or where strong things come from, rather than the actual substance itself. Anything in the wrong dosage or potency can kill you. Oxygen or water in the wrong dosage or wrong potency, not potency of water, but the wrong dosage of water can kill you. Drink too much water, it can cause a lot of problems. Thank you. That's wonderful. And so to me, it's more about the how we relate to these substances than that itself. But so the Sensible Policing Act is only about cannabis. We're not looking at other substances right now. But if we end the war on cannabis, it really, I think, will lead to better policies in all the rest of the drugs as well. And I think that's where I stand on that.
Aside from the amount that it's going to save, has Sensible BC looked into like the economic benefits of it?
Oh, you mean like a regulated taxation kind of thing like that, or?
Like a new like industry in BC that's legal, like, you know, more farms and like more spin-off jobs.
Absolutely. I mean, our act only decriminalizes, so the next step would be to regulate and tax and generate some revenue. The numbers really vary depending who you ask, but typically it's around $7 billion is what they think the BC marijuana industry is worth. Now, if it was fully legal all around the world, the price of cannabis would probably drop quite a bit. But I think it's always going to be a lucrative thing, and so it's kind of hard to estimate. You know, one of the products that I think, the cannabis products that would be the most popular product out there, we sell a cream at our dispensary. It doesn't get you high. It gets rid of your arthritis. It gets rid of eczema. It's really good for pain. It's an amazing medicine. This is something you would sell in London Drugs or in Shoppers Drug Mart. You could put it on a baby. You could put it on anybody of any age would benefit from this. And I ultimately think that the cannabis industry, in a fully legalized, integrated way in the future, it'll be about extracts and won't be so much about raw bud. There'll always be those who like smoking joints. That's never going to go away. But I think the broader audience, it'll become about extracts, about vaporizers, about foods, capsules, where you can really dial in the cannabinoid profile that you need. You know, at our dispensary, we can offer different strains. People know, okay, I want indica, or sativa, this mix. But in a fully legal environment, you could have extracts and cookies and things that have a calibrated CBD, THC content and levels. So, but the short answer is, it's a lot of money. It's a big number. Whatever that number is, it's a big number. Probably around $1 billion it would add to our economy. It would be like adding another forestry or another tourism in terms of where it fits into the economy. It's probably bigger than those things, but it's certainly comparable to our tourism industry and our forestry industry. And if we're the first province to decriminalize cannabis, our tourism industry will get a big boost there as well.
I just know that Amsterdam specifically recently instituted a policy, I'm not sure how well it was enforced, of denying legal bud to tourists, basically. Like, unless you had a valid Netherlands piece of identification, you weren't allowed to get any. Do you see something like that being an issue with pot tourism in British Columbia?
Well, first I'll clarify your comment a little bit. People often get Amsterdam and Holland mixed up as being one thing, but it's quite a bit different. And in Holland, their system is such that the cities have a lot of control over how they deal with coffee shops. To my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, the city of Amsterdam has not implemented that yet. That in Amsterdam, coffee shops are as open as they ever were. But other cities in Holland have done this change. And it's mostly the border towns. It's about tourists. Not so much American or Canadian tourists flying over. It's about German tourists that drive through. They go to a drive-through coffee shop, get their weed, and then drive right back to Germany. And German authorities complain to Holland about that, so they feel they have to do something. They have often have coalition governments in Holland, and so you have 2 or 3 parties sharing power. And the parties that have been in power recently have been trying to push to change these laws. But the mayor of Amsterdam says no way. The mayor of Amsterdam has said, we will not do this. If we do this, it'll just push it all back on the streets. It'll cause a lot of problems for our city. We like it the way it is. they've reduced the number of coffee shops in Amsterdam. They used to have, I think it was like 500. Now there's about 300. 300 is still a lot of coffee shops, but it's less than 500, so they've tightened up a little bit. But ultimately, I do not think Amsterdam will do that unless they are absolutely forced to. The mayor does not want to. A lot of other cities don't want to. And I think they've got an election coming up in Amsterdam in Holland in the next little while. I'm pretty sure they have one coming up, and that election might have a big impact on how this goes. But in Amsterdam themselves do not want to pass that. It's very contentious in Holland. And I'll also add that other countries like Spain has got a very open cannabis scene right now. A lot of other countries around the world, Mexico has decriminalized possession of many substances. Uruguay and other South American countries are talking about it. So it's really something that around the world, the main political direction these days is not away. It's towards decriminalization, regulation, and changing the drug laws. It's really where the world is going, even though people try to use that as an example of how it didn't work in Holland or something, but it works really well in Holland. It's been a big success there. Okay, I got to wrap it up. Any last final questions or comments or anything from anybody? No? Okay. SensibleBC.ca. Go there, sign our forms, get involved. We need your help. Do something to make this happen so that when you're looking at your grandchildren in the eye, you don't got to say to your grandkids, "Oh, sorry that you got busted for weed. I didn't get it together when I was your age." Do something now so your grandkids can go, "Marijuana was illegal when you were a kid? What? That's crazy, man. Like, that doesn't make any sense." And I want you to be able to go, "Yeah. The reason it's legal now is because I did something and I made a difference and I made some effort so that you would never have to know what it's like to be handcuffed and busted and incarcerated."